Here I am finally with the long-awaited return of Bleach with the 1000-year Blood War anime, which is something that Bleach fans have been begging for and is now finally here. I was interested to see how this arc would stack up in comparison to everything else Bleach has had previously, and if it was worth the painful wait that Bleach fans had to sit through, and as it would turn out, yes, it was worth the wait. Especially when I heard that TYBW was going to be adding scenes into the anime that he couldn't in the manga. This to me was a great sign for the state of this anime, having the author being involved, and this definitely paid dividends. Because there wasn't a single moment in the Bleach 1000-year Blood War anime when I wasn't entertained. The anime kicked off incredibly well, showing how fighting Hollows is like from the perspective of a foot soldier, as it builds up the horror and suspense to a crescendo, and when it seems like the Soul Reapers are about to die, they get saved by Ichigo and the boys. And their new designs are amazing. However, there's still something about the full-ring art direction that I like more. And seeing Ichigo's new Getsuga with the black flames was sick, as this is honestly the best his Getsuga has ever looked. After Ichigo saves the Soul Reapers, whose names I've already forgotten, they have a chance to just chat for a bit and do some classic Bleach comedy. We also find out that there have been disappearances of souls in the Rukon district, which does a good job at building suspense, with the updated set pieces and art quality being incredibly impressive. And with the 1000-year Blood War anime, excluding the voice actors who have been replaced, you can tell that their voices have aged a bit. I mean, it has been 10 plus years, so I'm not saying it ruins the anime, just saying that if you watch the dub, you could tell, especially with characters like Ichigo. And yes, I watched the dub. Please feel free to roast me in the comments for doing so. I started with the Bleach dub, and I'll finish with the Bleach dub, goddammit. I also noticed that this anime paced itself really well, especially for Bleach, and that as a result, it can sometimes feel like it's going at a super fast pace when it's really not. It's just that when compared to the original Bleach, which was paced awfully except for the Fullbring arc, as right after Ichigo and the boys' little chat, they're interrupted by someone standing on Ichigo's bed, and instead of Ichigo being concerned about his friend's safety, he asked the guy to get off his bed, which was a hilarious moment with how hung up Ichigo was with this guy being on his bed. During their fight, we find out that this guy is actually a Quincy, which was definitely interesting since we've been led to believe that Uryu was the only Quincy left alive in the world. The Quincy that Ichigo fights also tries to steal his Bankai, but is unable to, and initially I wasn't sure why, which was a mystery. They definitely helped in keeping me engaged with the story. After this incredible reintroduction into Bleach, it immediately sets the tone by killing off Chojiro, and even if he was a worthless character, this is a statement that things aren't going to be the same as in the original Bleach, as there wasn't a single quote-unquote good guy who died, unless you're willing to count Gin on account of him being revealed as a good guy right at the end. By killing off characters who are deemed good, it definitely makes 1000-year Blood War less predictable and more engaging as a result, as you never know who is going to win thanks to this amazing tone setter. And even with Bleach's darker tone, the comedy still works and doesn't ruin the action or tense scenes thanks to its timing and how well Bleach flows. We're also finally introduced to Yhwach, who can just explode people's head at will and has no remorse in doing so. So I guess they call it Blood War for a reason, because Yhwach isn't playing around. Bleach also did a great job with reintroducing previous characters like Nell, Harley-Bell, Melanie, and Loli, and it helps to make this arc feel grander by bringing characters from the Arrancar arc into the fold, along with the first great fight of 1000-year Blood War, where Ichigo goes up against Quilji OP, who I think had one of the best performances in 1000-year Blood War and is a highly entertaining character. Their fight was great, with Quilji having multiple form changes to keep the fight fresh and entertaining, with it eventually ending at the hands of Kisuke, who gets a cheap shot on Quilji, killing him instantly, and with Ichigo now headed to the Soul Society to help out as the Wandenreich attack the Soul Society. But before he can get there, Quilji decides that he is still alive and seals Ichigo in the Garganta. Meanwhile, in the Soul Society, things are not going well, with the Wandenreich slaughtering hundreds and thousands of Soul Reapers, with Izuru getting killed almost instantly, which I was a bit sad about, especially how suddenly it happened. All the fights in the Soul Society were great, as all the Soul Captains and Lieutenants' visuals have been updated and they look amazing. And it's during this attack on the Soul Society where Toshiro, Soifon, Sajin, and Byakuya lose their Bankai and are forced to fight without them. This kind of kills the morale on the front line and creates this sense of hopelessness, but I'm interested to see how these characters will adapt to not having a Bankai. I thought the Byakuya fight was especially great, with Byakuya gaining this sense of fear and doubt, which I found interesting for a character that always exudes maximum confidence. But we learn that it's his fear of losing Rukia that consumes him, as it's something he can't control, which shows just how much he really cares about Rukia. The action in it was solid, with Byakuya getting his shit kicked in and Renji once again doing what he does and losing. I think the only person having a good time right now is Kenpachi, as he rips a guy's throat out because he was speaking to him. Another great fight was with the Quincy Driscoll, as we learn that he was the one who killed Chojuro, and as soon as he says that, Yamamoto comes out of nowhere. We also get to see what Chojiro's Bankai looked like, along with a pretty emotional and well done backstory. The backstory would have been better had the character been more important and involved with the story instead of doing basically nothing, and while Driscoll is pretty cocky, that wouldn't last long, as Yamamoto is not just some badass old man, he is the badass old man, and incinerates Driscoll where he stands. And by having Yamamoto on the front lines, it breathes life back into the other Soul Reapers and inspires them to fight again. Bleach does a good job at showing off that sense of brotherhood and camaraderie that all the Soul Reapers share amongst one another. And this brings us into what is easily one of the best fights of the year between Yhwach and Yamamoto, which has to be one of the most well animated and choreographed fights I have ever witnessed. My favorite moment was when Yamamoto revealed his Bankai, as all the flames disappear at once and it starts to get very hot, with even Toshiro's Bankai that got stolen starting to melt. This creates a tense moment where Yhwach tries to figure out where his flames went, and we see that all of his flames have been concentrated into the tip of his sword, with anything it touches simply being blown away. The lighting and shading were amazing, not only in this fight but in all of Bleach. We also learn that the Quincy's were actually the ones who attacked first 1,000 years ago, and that 200 years ago was when the Soul Society's extermination of the Quincy's took place. This is a huge reveal, as it shows that the Quincy's are the true villains, and that the Soul Society only attacked to protect itself. We also see another stage of Yamamoto's Bankai, with him summoning everyone he's ever killed to fight against Yhwach. And getting to see Yamamoto angry and emotionally charged during this fight was amazing, as he doesn't often express his emotions so visibly and intensely. The fight ends with Yhwach being defeated, only for it to be revealed that it wasn't the actual Yhwach and that it was a fake, with the real Yhwach having paid a visit to Chair Aizen, with Yhwach attempting to get Aizen on their side, but he refuses. And I found it funny how Aizen managed to keep Yhwach in there longer than he realized, doing a quick favor for the Soul Society for no reason at all. Yhwach ends up stealing Yamamoto's Bankai and kills him. This was a hard-hitting moment, and Yamamoto's expression and Shunsui's reaction being the final nail in the coffin, which I thought was a brilliant send-off to this character, with Yamamoto's backstory doing a masterful job at showing how he evolved as a character from nothing but pure evil to developing a sense of justice and caring about others, being shaped by the kindness of the people around him. And after this fight, Ichigo finally shows up, and in one of the most vulnerable and emotional moments of Bleach, Byakuya, of all people, starts crying and begs Ichigo to save the Soul Society. This scene almost had me in tears, especially since I thought Byakuya was going to die here. When Ichigo tries to fight Yhwach, it doesn't go very well. He gets stabbed in the throat, his Bankai gets broken, and it's revealed that Ichigo is actually a Quincy, which definitely shocks Ichigo and makes his past that much more interesting and mysterious. And during all the fighting, Uryu has been uncovering the truth about who the villains are and learns that they are the Quincy's, and what really happened all those years ago with the Quincy's being the initial aggressor against the Soul Reapers. And I believe Bleach did an excellent job at showing just how conflicted Uryu is, with him having to choose between his people, the Quincy's, or his closest and most loyal friends. The tough choice is something Uryu struggles with throughout Bleach and was handled really well. After all the fighting ceases in the Soul Society, we are introduced to Squad Zero, who are a squad of only captains. And the personality of all the Squad Zero captains is great, especially Uetsu, who is easily my favorite out of all of them. And the reason for their visit being to help the gravely injured members recover, and to help Ichigo reforge his blade, with Kisuke showing up for a quick minute along with fucking Grimmjow of all people. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. As soon as I heard that voice, I knew who it was, which is really impressive and goes to show how distinct every character's voice is and the amount of variety that Bleach has. We also see that Kugo, Tsukishima, and Giriko are here in the Soul Society, which makes perfect sense. And I'm glad that the Fullbring arc wasn't just a one-time thing and they're still acknowledging these characters. When Ichigo reaches the Royal Palace, the first person he visits is Tenjiro, who despite his looks is actually a healer, which I found both hilarious and surprising. I thought it was hilarious when he just picks up Byakuya and yeeted his body into Blood Hell Pond, which was some comedy that was definitely needed, especially considering what we just went through and what we're about to go through. And after this, Ichigo and Renji meet Kiryu and end up having an eating competition, and also learn that the captains in Squad Zero were a part of the Soul Society's history and added something to it, with Kiryu being responsible for the creation of Gikone, which led to the invention of soul candies, and that the goofiest character, Uetsu, invented the Zanpakuto, which had me stunned. stunned. Meanwhile, in the Soul Society, Unohana and Kenpachi are having a fight to the death, as now that Shunsui is the new head captain, he wants to train Kenpachi and leaves it in the hands of Unohana, which I initially thought was weird because we haven't really seen her fight before, and I was unsure how this was gonna go, but to say that I was blown away would be putting it lightly. This fight was a masterpiece. Unohana's new expression on her face was menacing as all hell, and learning that she was an original member of the 13 Court Guard Squad and that she was the first ever Kenpachi were reveals that I was shocked to hear, but definitely made this matchup worth watching. This fight was animated insanely well and was super brutal as Unohana kills Kenpachi over and over again and then brings him back to life, with Kenpachi slowly getting better and better at fighting, as only on the verge of death does Kenpachi get stronger. As we learn that he suppressed his skills due to his first encounter with Unohana in order to fight on the edge, meaning that Kenpachi has never actually fought at full strength before, which is kinda scary when you consider what he has already accomplished at this point. Seeing Unohana's Bankai was insane, with blood pouring everywhere. This is really called Thousand Year Blood War for a reason, with the only reason Unohana mastered healing being so she could enjoy battle. The end to this fight was incredible, as Unohana ends up dying at the hands of Kenpachi, sacrificing herself to help Kenpachi become more powerful. To say this was a bittersweet moment would be an understatement, as Unohana was a character I liked even if she was a little underused. This was a really emotional moment for Bleach, losing another captain in such a short amount of time, with Kenpachi showing a great deal of emotion when faced with a dying Unohana, and for Kenpachi this is big, as this shows a human side to Kenpachi that we have never really seen from him before, and I was impressed with how well done it was. It didn't feel sappy or generic, it felt like a rare vulnerable moment for Kenpachi and helped to make his character more diverse without weakening it. And after this, he finally hears his Zanpakuto, which once again reminded me that this entire time in Bleach so far, Kenpachi has just been swinging a normal sword that wasn't even a Zanpakuto, which is a reminder of how strong Kenpachi really is. After this, we return to Ichigo and Renji as they go to visit Oetsu, and I found it pretty funny how they just find him hanging around with a bunch of girls, only to find out that all those girls were actually Zanpakutos. Anyways, the training begins with them having to find their Azauchi, which is a blank Zanpakuto given to a Soul Reaper, which eventually evolves into the user's Zanpakuto after having spent a considerable amount of time with it, which is pretty interesting and a concept that I really like and is seen throughout countless characters, as a lot of the Soul Reaper's Zanpakutos have a personality that is either exactly the same as the user or the complete opposite. After the training, we learn that Ichigo actually failed the test due to him not knowing who he is completely and not having a true connection with his Zanpakuto. This takes us into Isshin's backstory, where Ichigo meets his father, and while Ichigo is comfortable with his father not telling him about his past, Isshin decides that it is finally time that he reveals what happened all those years ago, as we see that he used to be the captain of Squad 10, and I found it nice to see young Toshiro and Rangiku, as they were both pretty entertaining whenever they were talking. And after learning of Soul Reaper deaths occurring in the human world, Isshin goes to investigate. Meanwhile, on the other side, we're introduced to Misaki, who we learn was a royal Quincy and is currently living in the Ishida household with a young Ryukin. And it seemed like there was this massive amount of pressure from Ryukin's family for Misaki to get together with Ryukin to preserve a royal bloodline, with Ryukin also being against the idea and kind of detesting his family for forcing it onto Misaki, as Ryukin would rather see Misaki happy than anything else. Misaki senses the presence of a powerful Hollow and the Soul Reaper Isshin and goes to help out, but not before being stopped by Ryukin. And in this moment, we see what kind of characters these people are, as Ryukin wants to prioritize the safety of the Quincy's and his family. Meanwhile, Misaki prioritizes the lives of those who are in danger, regardless of her royal status and regardless of who they are, even if they're considered her mortal enemy. With Ryukin and Katagiri, who clearly has the hots for Ryukin, join Misaki to help defeat the Hollow. The Isshin vs Hollow fight was amazing. It wasn't the best fight in Thousand Year Blood War, but it was incredible. The way the action flows and the effect on explosions and rain, along with the lighting and set pieces, makes this one of the most well animated and highly detailed fights in Bleach. When Misaki does show up, she was badass, as when she can't hit the Hollow with normal arrows, she just lets it bite her and then blows its brains out, which was a sick moment for sure. And after the Hollow was defeated, Misaki goes to help Isshin and tells him that she is a Quincy, and the way Isshin reacts to this just shows you what kind of character he is. He doesn't react in anger, hate or fear, but in one of gratitude and curiosity, and Isshin's dubbed voice actor does a great job of portraying Isshin's laid-back personality and just how nice of a person Isshin really is. In fact, the dubbed voice acting in general was incredible and worth noting. The characters' voices continue to be incredibly distinct from one another despite how many there are. I also found it really smart how they tie this event in with Aizen, as Aizen made a holo out of a dead Soul Reaper and was planning to use it to pass holo powers onto Isshin, but it instead went after Misaki. Aizen really wasn't lying when he said that he has been messing with Ichigo since before his birth, and because of the injury she suffered from the holo, Misaki starts dying, and right when it seemed hopeless, Kisuke out of nowhere comes in and explains that the holo powers Misaki has will lead her to self-destruct and that there is no way of restoring her to normal. And because she is a hybrid of Quincy and holo, they need a hybrid of Soul Reaper and human, with Kisuke having already prepared a human Gigai, and offers Isshin this proposition, that if Isshin were to bound his soul together with the Gigai and Misaki, he could protect her from the holo within. The downfall of this would be that this bond of Soul Reaper, holo and Quincy will be passed down to all of her descendants forever, and that if Isshin chooses to enter and be bound to the Gigai, he will lose all of his Soul Reaper powers potentially forever. And even with all these downsides and Misaki being considered his mortal enemy, Isshin still chooses to sacrifice his own Soul Reaper powers to save Misaki's life, and has a similar speech reminiscent to that of Misaki's earlier, showing just how similar they are in their personalities and attitude. And this shocks Ryugen and changes his perception of Soul Reapers and shows him that not all Soul Reapers are as evil as he's been led to believe. And after saving her from the holo powers within her, we see this beautiful montage of Isshin's life after losing his Soul Reaper powers, and the voice actor does a good job clearly illustrating just how much Isshin loved Misaki, especially that analogy of Misaki being like the sun, which nearly brought me to tears when I watched it, that I almost forgot how insane of an age gap there is between the two. We also learned that once Ichigo had achieved his holo form, the bond that Isshin was placed in was broken, and that he was able to return to being a Soul Reaper, which makes sense considering we first see Isshin as a Soul Reaper after Soul Society arc, a little after Ichigo first achieved his holo form, excluding that ass filler in the middle. I'm sure you know what I'm referring to. The last thing we learn is how Misaki actually died 9 years ago, with Yhwach taking away the powers of those Quincy's he deemed not worthy, which meant that on the day she was unable to protect Ichigo with her Quincy powers and chose to sacrifice her life instead. I loved how Bleach made Misaki's death tie into Yhwach and the Quincy's. This was really clever and helps to bring everything full circle very cohesively. It was nice to see all the Soul Reapers training and also learning about Sajin's people, but that's put in the background for the biggest bombshell Bleach has ever had, and that is that old man Zangetsu, who has been with Ichigo since basically the beginning, are actually his Quincy powers manifested as Yhwach from 1,000 years ago. This is a brilliant reveal and helps to explain why Ichigo hasn't been able to fully use his powers, as he always believed Old Man Zangetsu was his Zanpakuto, even though it was actually Holo Ichigo who he would repeatedly resist against, explaining why he was never one with his Zanpakuto. And Zangetsu gives this heartfelt speech to Ichigo, with him and the voice actor really pouring their hearts out here, with Zangetsu eventually leaving Ichigo behind, and after getting his new dual swords, one for his Quincy powers and one for his Soul Reaper powers, Ichigo finally realizes that both Zangetsu and his Zanpakuto are him, with Ichigo's final line for 1,000 Year Blood War being, "You are me." A representation of how both him and his Zanpakuto have become one, and no longer need to communicate with each other because now they have become one themselves, which was an amazing moment for Ichigo's character, with him finally coming to terms with his powers, and a great way for him to fully achieve his Soul Reaper powers, making him earn it and not come from some sort of cheap cop-out, with the final moments of 1,000 Year Blood War ending on a massive cliffhanger, with Uryu deciding to join the Quincy's, which definitely flips things on its head a bit, as this is a difficult pill to swallow, but one that makes sense, as Uryu chose his own race during his inner struggle between the two sides. And it will be interesting to see how this plays out and what Ichigo will have to say about it. 1,000 Year Blood War is without a doubt an incredible anime, and it somehow lived up to all the hype and expectations that fans have been waiting a decade plus for. 1,000 Year Blood War felt like a culmination of everything that made all of Bleach's previous arcs great, all in one. It has the hype fights of the Arrancar arc that are accompanied by top-notch animation along with highly detailed set pieces and characters. It has a menacing and evil villain to build around, but it also has a very personal and emotional side to it that made arcs like Fullbring so worthwhile and interesting to watch. Along with how 1,000 Year Blood War brings so many other characters into the fold, it really feels like the finale to Bleach. It also tells its story very cohesively and is paced very well in its 13-episode runtime, with it offering more despite its reduced episodes. The first season was exciting from start to finish, and has me excited to see how the rest of the 1,000 Year Blood War anime will play out. Thank you all for watching. This is my longest video yet, so I hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you all later.